Good morning, all. This is a Monday morning, and we're refreshed from the weekend. We're just myself and Pat were discussing the amount of damage done to our mansions by that vile wind that blew. Was any of the turrets in your palace damaged, Pat, or did you emerge
No,
unscathed?
unfortunately, but Jude, as I've told you and our viewer on many occasions, there's a sort of what they call it, Jude, a planting, not a plantation, a planting, trees, a whole lot of trees,
That's a
that were
plantation of
or
trees.
planted by
Plantation of
the
trees.
Forestry Commission.
Yeah.
Tree, a plantation of trees. Right, there's a plantation of trees behind us, and there's quite a few trees around us. And Jude, last Friday I was sitting looking out my window, and Jude, that is over. I am 71. That is the worst storm by a mile I've ever come
Oh
across.
yeah. Yeah.
And our trees, I thought at one stage one of them was trying to do a limbo dance. I was swaying that much. So I thought we were going to get, full on, or that there was going to come a tree come crashing down on our on
Yeah.
our
Would that have been a
roof of the house.
possibility, Pat?
But
Have you got trees
fortunately,
close enough to fall on the house?
Jude, I would think so, Jude, because there's trees everywhere around us. But
Hmm.
Jude, I know. You see, I think our house, the plantation slopes down, and our house is sort of on a level hollow. And I think
Uh-huh.
the trees actually give us a bit of protection from the wind.
Oh
So
yeah,
we're
yeah.
actually very lucky. And I went out and
Hmm.
checked. There,
Hmm.
there's, as far as I can see, touch wood. There's no damage to the house.
Well,
There's
I
no
tell you.
roof tiles off. There's
Oh,
no
you're
fences
lucky there. No, we
down.
only
Yeah,
we got one off. I tell you, the thing that struck me most, that annoyed me most, actually, the TV was on the blink and the lights. So you
yeah.
couldn't read, and you couldn't. Well, you could read if you had a flashlight, but the hell with that. You couldn't read, and you couldn't watch TV, and there's no heat. So
Yeah.
pretty well snookered, I
Yeah.
thought. I was glad to get to my bed. In fact,
No, our electricity went off on about 10 o'clock or half 9 on the Friday morning, and it didn't come back until about 10 o'clock. In fact, it was just about 24 hours. There was no heat, and the only thing we had, Jude, Rosie, my dear missus, got a wind-up radio. I think she bought it for a tenner in one of
what a
them
brilliant
pawn
idea.
shops,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
she had charged it up the night before, and it at least provided us with entertainment.
Uh,
We were able to listen to the news and
well,
records.
we had the
And
wireless
by the way,
lamp
you were
too.
chatting there. I got a what do you call it, a torch and a satin red, a book about Catherine the Great and Patonkin. So what a way to spend all day sitting there Friday evening.
How did you arrange that torch, Pat? Were you holding the torch in one hand and turn the pages with the other? Hold the book with the other.
Well, I was sitting, we got there, and on the seat in the book like this.
Well, I
Yeah,
thought of that and I said, oh, geez, I don't think I've got the energy for that. Anyway, we survived it, so we shouldn't be complaining. Unlike that
we survived it.
unfortunate
Yeah,
poor guy in Donegal that we're talking about, that young fella that
yeah.
was a tree fell
And
in the
you
sky.
know, someone that one it really got to me. I saw the photograph, the finest looking young fella
Mm,
you
mm,
could cast an eye on. He had Hollywood looks. It
mm,
came the background to that. Just a quick summary is that his family came to Donegal. They were Polish. Polish. His name was Dudek, and he worked up in this place. I think it's one of them American factories in Letterkenny. Now I don't know why he was out there, why they moved the workforce, but that's a matter for them. But
mm,
God bless him. He obviously was a conscientious worker. That he went into his work on the night that there was a red warning, and
mm.
so on. Now, why he was at work, how should he have been at work or whatever? I'll leave that up to whatever. But God bless him, he's dead now, and his parents, I feel for him terrible
Yeah.
because he's obvious from the wee bits I can gather that he was a totally decent,
Mm.
hardworking, fine uh, young fella, and I know and it's an awful tragedy.
Well, yeah, so you'd wonder what people he's working for wouldn't say, no, they would know and say, it's like, in a way you could say it's not the same, but it's similar to a man who's a bit tipsy after a few jars and he's forgotten into his car. If people are friendly with him or have any influence over him, you should say, ah, for God's sake, don't do that. Don't do that. Ah, too late now.
Well, Judy's, yeah, I don't know. There's some talk that the firm sort of sent people home early before the rally, but I
Uh-huh.
really don't know, Judy, and I'm not going to
Mm.
make any accusations or anything on the basis I just don't know. But
Mm.
I'm questioning is should anybody been at work with a red
Nobody
alert?
should.
That's all I'm
Nobody
saying.
should have been. Although I noticed the broadcasters all got to work, however they managed it. So that it's always comforting when you hear
Yeah,
the voice of, people they almost trust because they're on the other end of the in the radio station.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, let's
yeah.
talk a wee
Yeah.
bit, Pat, about our guest on the last podcast, Gabriel McAffrey. I had always assumed that he was a dairyman because of McAffrey. The name McAffrey is quite a fairly common
Yeah.
name in Derry, McCaffrey or McCafferty. You remember the little Gaelic singers were organised by James McCafferty. You don't
Uh,
remember them, do you? Do you remember them? Remember?
McCafferty,
Do you remember the
no,
little
dude,
Gaelic
dude.
singers?
I caught the tail end. They were big. They were big in the 1960s, and I just caught the tail end of them because I was a
Oh,
wee. But I remember they'd gone to America, and they were very famous.
oh yeah, they came and did a performance when I was a boarder in St. Columns. Oh, I fell madly in love with the girl second from the end. Don't know who she was, but anyway, really something. Okay, talk about Gabriel though. Gabriel is a Belfast man. How did you get in touch with him, by the way?
To tell you the truth, on the basis, I think the mutual myself and our friend Ray Bassett,
Ah,
who's the former ambassador to Canada. I was friends with Ray, and I think Gabriel was friends with Ray as well,
yeah, that
and we
explains
started
that. Yeah.
chatting on Facebook and social media, and
Hmm.
then I think that's where it started from.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, what do you think? It's very interesting now because Gabriel is clearly very much. I asked him, you remember, and he said he felt very comfortable, and that was where his life was, and his children are, and his grandchildren in Canada. And yet he has maintained this interest in Ireland. And I mean, it's a very active interest. He's not just interested in it as a sort of a cultural, dreamy vision of a place, but he's interested in current politics and so on. Um, Brian Friel has something to say about that in one of his plays, but tell us what you think of that. Do you think that people should go, when they go abroad, should they integrate completely with their new culture? And I mean, just forget about the place you used to live in or were brought up in. Or do you think this thing of hanging on or having a link to your origins is some way enriching?
Jude, I think the latter. Jude, I've met quite a few. Jude, I've written about a guy I met in Australia. He's a guy who left Derry when he was 14, and he's been in Australia 50 years. He's 64 now and has never been back. He intrigues me because he's a very sort of quiet fella. And I remember sitting down chatting to him one night, and at the start he didn't talk very much, and then for some reason he opened up and he started chatting away. And he says, "Know someone, Pat?" He says, "I think of Derry every day." He says, "There isn't a day goes past." It was something he had suppressed you big time. He said, "I remember fishing on the fawn, and he'd start talking about a wee girl he was in love with when he was about 14 or 15, when before he left, and so on. And he started chatting about going to the secondary school and all the friends he had there. And I think there was a sort of nostalgia and a longing there. And like we were chatting to Gabriel on Friday. Gabriel, Jude, as you so rightly put it, Gabriel is he might live in Canada and he might be there 36 years, but he's totally engaged in being Irish and all things Irish. He
Uh-huh.
follows the politics here. He knows what's going on here, and he's involved in I think various Irish committees and stuff in Canada.
Hmm.
And his home is in Canada. His family is there and all the rest of it. But he and his soul and his heart and all the rest, he's an Irishman. But yet I remember meeting many years ago. I think she was third generation Irish. And when she started talking to me about Ireland, she started to cry. There was that sort of sense of I don't know what it is, dude. People have a thing about their identity, and it goes deep.
Well, I remember the thing that first got me thinking about this was I think it was 1967, maybe or even earlier, when I saw for the first premiere actually of Brian Friel's play Philadelphia, Here I Come. And in it, it's all about a young guy who's
Yeah,
going to be emigrating the next day and to stay with his aunt and his uncle in
yeah,
Philadelphia and make his life there. And there's a conflict within him as to whether or not he should go or not go. And the schoolmaster that's sort of kind of looks is a mentor for him. The old schoolmaster comes in and says, "Listen, son, when you go to America, become 100% American. No looking back, no drowning the shamrock. Just focus on the future and be a fully American rather than all the time looking over your shoulder." And
yeah,
at the time, I quite agreed with that. That seemed to me to make a lot
yeah.
of sense. And then I went to Canada myself, and I found, as you said, that thing. Maybe not every day, but an awful lot of days I was thinking about home. and it seemed the natural thing, if possible, to gravitate back
Yeah.
towards home. And yet, and in terms of financial and in terms of openness and all space and even weather, I mean, winters in Canada are vile, but the good weather you get in the summer makes up for it. In so many ways, if you were making an equation, Canada would win out. But somehow I felt chained to here with just things like accents and
Mm.
the clouds and
Mm.
even things like radio. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
no, I find it hard. I remember the first question I was asked when I came back here in an interview. They said, "Why are you coming back? You're obviously doing reasonably well. You'd be." I said, "Yeah, I'd be making twice as much money there as I'm here, and your offer of a job." And I explained it by
Mm.
just saying, "I don't know why." I said, "It's like a graft. You know, where you try to graft a piece of a branch onto something else or
Yeah.
onto a tree. The graft takes for some people, for others it
Yeah.
doesn't. And I'm one of the ones that doesn't." Um, so you think Gabriel can straddle
Yeah.
both sides of it completely, fruitfully?
He seems very content. Dude,
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of truth in what you said. Some people adjust to life as an immigrant and get on with it. In
Hmm.
fact, are capable of putting, their old life behind them. And there are
Yeah.
many others, dude, who never ever adjust to a life. They're an Irish person from the day they're born to the day they die, even if they spent 50 years. But my mother, Jude, I always remembered her, and her brothers emigrated and all the rest. And she had this thing against immigration big time. She says immigration destroys families. And there was a certain element of truth in it
Oh
within our
yeah.
own family circle.
Yeah.
My paternal grandfather, he had a lot of relatives who emigrated, like sisters and so on. And apparently, when they'd get a letter from Australia or Scotland, he'd put up on the mantelpiece and say, "I'll answer that someday." And maybe when they emigrated at the start, he'd respond within maybe a week, and then a month, and then a year, and
Yeah.
then they'd lost touch totally. I have weirdest relatives in Australia that I think it was nearly a 50-year gap before they came back, and
Yeah.
so on. And Jude, I'm not going to get into details, but there's a man I know very well. His sister died there recently, and like he's in Australia and she's over here. Jude, that's very, very tough.
Mm, it is. It is. But you're right about the fact that it certainly splits up families. I suppose families, when they get married, split up to
Yeah,
some extent anyway. But at the same time, there's a possibility of
yeah,
closeness if they're still living. Most of my siblings are living, or well, those that have survived are within driving distance. But I don't know.
yeah.
It's a difficult one. I don't regret for a moment not. I don't
Jude,
regret having
immigration,
gone.
immigration was a big thing in Ireland. Say
Oh
again?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it was forced immigration. Very few. I didn't have to go, but I got a lot more money by going.
Yeah,
But I think if it's voluntary immigration is good, but keep in mind that the place you go to, it might be just quite as simple as going there for 2 years and then coming back. You start up and down routes and
mm,
form networks, and it's very difficult to sort of up sticks and go back to what was there because it may be different. Things may have changed in even a couple of years that you're away. Anyway, let's,
yeah,
let's let's move to a more general topic.
yeah,
You got an email today, and I got it as well from Ireland's Future. Um, Niall Murphy is the secretary of
yeah,
that, the lawyer, and he's saying there's a big event in April happening in Philadelphia, which again folds
yeah,
in very neatly to what we're talking about. And he's saying about how across Irish America there's a keen interest in this. And when we say Irish America,
yeah,
that's exactly what we're talking about. People from Ireland who have Irish roots but who have made their lives in America. And he says that he is hopeful that Democrats and Republicans who have an interest in Ireland's future will be willing to assist and advance our work. Uh, what was your reaction when you
yeah.
read that, Pat? Was it, optimistic or what?
Jude, I remember asking Hume one time, during various conversations. He used
Yeah.
to come down to the office. And one day I said to him, "Hey, John, by the way, there's three strands things you come up with. How did you come up with it?" He says, "Well, it's simple." He says, "In many ways." He says, "Ireland and Britain have been at war for 800, not at war, but
Mm, mm,
and
mm.
the tectonic plates have been colliding for
Uh,
800 years. And he says, we have our opinion, they have their opinion. He says, there are 60 million people, we're 5 million. This is, he was talking about the island of Ireland at that stage. He says, we're sort of, we can't do anything. We can't push them over the cliff. And he says they don't really make much of an effort to look after us
Mm.
and all the rest. And he says the only way he thought one day, what is the best way that we can get some sort of movement and all the rest of it? And he says, I thought Irish America, very powerful. So many, there's 30 something plus million people in America claim of Irish descent. And he said he thought if he could harness that power, Kennedy, Moynihan, Tip O'Neill, Governor O'Dwyer in New York and all the rest. So there were no, he started courting them, got into the White House, very much and then things started to move. The Good Friday Agreement, the Anglo-Irish Agreement in '85, the Good Friday Agreement in '94, ceasefires and all the rest. And Bill Clinton, Jude played a big role in that. He gave Gerry Adams and Martin McGuinness,
Jesus.
visas to come to America, despite even the Dublin government wasn't all that happy about it.
Well, the State
So,
Department
Jude,
in the States were very much
Americans
against it.
got influence in a way that, say again?
I said the State Department in Washington was very opposed to giving the visas because they are sort of at a very
Yeah, because
pro-British line.
they were Anglophiles. They were whatever
Yeah,
Britain wants, they get type thing. But
yeah.
anyway, what I see in America too, Ireland's future, Niall Murphy, it's a smart move. They're talking about 500 people at a
Mhm.
big function on April 10th in Philadelphia, or where is it? Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So basically, what they're saying is we're expanding this. I think it's a very smart move, Jude, and it's
Yeah.
harnessing a lot of maybe key influencers in America.
Yeah, I agree with you, Pat. I must say, when I thought about it, I said, well, none of those guys in America are going to have a vote if it comes to a border poll. But then I thought again and realized, they could put pressure on so that a border poll happens, and their influence
Yeah.
could encourage people to vote in favor of Irish unity. Um, so all in all, I think I would be very much in favor of it. I only visited Philadelphia once in my life. I was very struck by I hadn't realized in my ignorance how much it was in the mainstream of the history of the US. So many things, historical events occurred
Very
there.
much so.
And
Yeah.
there is a very strong, I know that for sure, there is a very strong Irish American community there. And they feel quite passionate. In some ways,
Yeah.
the British don't like them and the Unionists don't like them because they retain a kind of a pure vision of Ireland. And the British and certainly the Unionists would dismiss it as being, Celtic twilight and leprechauns and all the rest of it. But in my experience of them, that's not the case at all. There might be a little bit of that, but they're very often they're more informed about things going on at home than I was. And certainly they're well up in terms of culture. I mean, you visit Boston College, for example. My God, there's guys there that know more about Irish history and Irish culture than I would in several lifetimes. So that strength of knowledge of Irish and affection
Yeah.
for Irish Ireland is very important, and fair play to Niall Murphy for making sure that happens. Um, let's move, Pat, to an item, as in I think it's in the Irish Times today about Irish neutrality. Um, now, they
Mm.
link this with the EU, and the way Ireland, the south of Ireland, is coming under
Mm.
pressure to become part of NATO, because they're saying, they look at
Yeah.
it's a dangerous world and so on.
Yeah.
The person who wrote this article in the Irish Times does a really good job. They said, for example, Sean McBride, the famous Sean McBride, son of Mulgone, um, rejected the Americans' invitation to join NATO in
Mm.
1949 because he thought it would deepen partition in Ireland. Now, I'm not sure how he arrived at that, but he felt that that would be the case.
Yeah.
A lot of people at the time were very much opposed to it. The Irish Times wrote in an editorial about Ireland's sullen isolation. Alfred O'Reilly, who was the president of UCC, talked
Mm.
about you have to take sides in the war between communism and democracy. Uh, the Archbishop of Armagh, Cardinal
Uh,
Dalton, was very much against it, in favor of joining NATO because there was Cardinal Manzente. Remember the prisoner of where was it, Czechoslovakia or somewhere, the
Yeah,
threat
yeah.
Soviet
No, I
Russia.
think was it Poland? Yeah,
And Lamas, right up to Lamas,
mm,
was saying there is no neutrality and we are not neutral. And the only voice that spoke up really was Noel Brown's voice. He was wanting to know, let's get this clear.
yeah,
Join the common market. That means we have to abandon our traditional policy of neutrality. And he was urging people to think hard about that. Um, and the latest clash that the article lists was very good was between, he talks about um, Neil Martin, who's saying that Breed Smith, I think she's People Before Profit, that she had talked about tanks, NATO tanks in O'Connell Street, and she was talking about colonial
yeah.
powers and cannon fodder. Where would you stand on that, Pat? The two things do seem to be linked. Obviously, I think you'd agree the EU is very important for Ireland generally, certainly to the south.
Yeah.
Is it necessary then to buy into the military thing?
This is one you could argue from A to Z one way, and from Z back to A the other way. Here's the point. There's a guy called Dominic Lawson. I presume he's the son of Nigel Lawson.
Yeah.
He wrote a scathing, excoriating article about Ireland a couple of weeks ago, and I think it was the Daily Mail, about Ireland freeloading on security from NATO and from Britain, that we didn't bother spending any money on defence and all the rest of it,
Mm.
and that we were the sort of how do you say the how we Britain's security could be hole below the waterline by Ireland's carelessness and all the rest of it.
Mm.
And just, I remember reading some time ago, and I can't even remember how accurate now this, but I remember reading somebody said, uh, remember I think it was the Americans, remember the gas line between Russia
Yeah.
and the West
Yeah.
that was damaged? And
Yeah.
apparently, our most of the big lines that do the communication between here are somewhere down about the Cove of Cork, and they're saying they're underwater lines and all that. And apparently, Russian submarines and etc., have been apparently seen in the area and all the rest.
Okay,
Now,
so cut
well,
to
they're
the
just
chase,
there to do a
Pat.
wee bit
Cut
of
to the
sort of
chase.
reconnoitering.
Cut to the chase. Would
Aye,
you?
but the bottom line is they're saying all those things are basically we are not looking after ourselves,
Uh,
and dude,
you
those are a
agree?
threat to our security. So I sometimes wonder should we have a good look at this neutrality?
Well, I would agree with you, and it seems obvious. And once you start to have kind of a political union or even an economic union, inevitably the military side of things is going to come up. But last night, just by chance, I was
Yeah.
watching a PBS program about war, and it was the stories of four guys
Mm.
from the States, different towns in the States, who came through that war and the Japanese war that followed the Second World War after Germany was defeated. And it was harrowing.
Mm.
I mean, it was harrowing. They started to give figures. I
Mm.
never, ever thought that the bombing of Hiroshima or Nagasaki was necessary or even human. But then again, when I listened to this and I
Yeah.
got the kind of level of casualties Americans were suffering and the level of casualties they have to face, and a veteran from that time talking to the camera and saying how the thing that used to plague him was to have to go up to the front again after one skirmish, I'll have to do it again and
Mm.
again and again. And,
Yeah.
his friends dying around him and dying
Yeah.
horribly or awfully. And,
Yeah.
if you do the terrible equation, he said, in fact, there was less lives lost through the dropping of the atom
Mm.
bombs than there would have been if they had continued fighting. You know something, Pat? I think war
The
is
conflict had
nuts.
continued.
War.
Yeah.
I have three sons. Now they're all sufficiently old to be not
Yeah.
available for military service. But if I had sons who were of the age to fight, I would be saying to them, just don't do it. I just feel somehow it's not worth it. It's not
Yeah.
worth it. Even I've been subject
Mm.
to Japanese domination, German occupation a lot. I would tend to say, no, don't go out, son. I don't want you killed. I don't want you getting an arm blown off. It's just
Yeah.
madness. It's
Yeah.
this program said man is a belligerent animal, and he's sort of right. But God, we should have evolved by now. have I convinced you with my peace speech, Pat?
Mm. No, but here's the point, Jude. There's big choices to be made, and like your man, he was anti-Irish, but he also had a point, Lawson. So, and when I started to think about it, Jude, and there's so many things. In fact, when you start talking about it, you could bore yourself to death about whether you should join NATO or whether you shouldn't.
Well, I'm not. See, I don't know. Maybe I'm naive, but I would be more concerned for my own family. And if you're not prepared to say, "Oh yeah, I'd send my son out. I'd send my son out to fight in that war," if you're not prepared to say that, then I don't think you should be saying, "Oh yes, our country should line up with the NATO or whatever." I think you put your family where
You
your
could
mouth
argue that
is,
as
so
well.
to speak. And when you think about it in those terms,
Yeah.
it's maybe not quite so simple. Okay, we're running out of time here, Pat. We've only
No,
about 6 minutes
go
left.
ahead.
Let's talk a bit
Yeah.
about Michael D. Higgins. Wow, I think this is really interesting. He gave a speech at the Holocaust Memorial Day event, and he talked about how he hoped the
Yeah.
Israeli families who'd been bereaved recently with October the 7th, that
Yeah.
they'd be able to cope with that. And he then mentioned Gaza. He hoped for the release of the hostages, and he hoped that those who were killed in the, as he put it, the rubble of Gaza would welcome the long overdue ceasefire.
Mm.
Whereupon some Jewish members of the I was going to say the congregation of the meeting, one woman stood up and walked
Mm.
out. Several others turned their back on him and eventually had to be removed. Um,
Mm.
they saw his mentioning this even as an outrage. And I was thinking that you saw that questions and answers, or what question time on BBC the other night, where the guy
Mm.
began shouting about how dare you talk about Gaza as genocide. What are your thoughts, Pat? You think should Michael D keep his mouth shut, or should he?
And actually, I didn't see that. Didn't see a question time, Jude. But Jude, I've become very anti-Israel, very, very anti-Israel. It seems to me that, uh, like Jude, I think the what do you call it? The Holocaust was the worst thing that happened in sort of
Yes.
human history. It was a
Yep.
ritualized, industrialized killing,
Oh, it's
mass
terrible.
killing. Absolutely no.
Yep.
And the way the Jewish people were treated was as an outrage and an absolute. And Jude, for years I believed they were quite entitled to a homeland and somewhere that they could call home, that and safety after what happened to them.
Uh,
Right, Jude, I've sort of nearly gone 180 degrees from that very liberal position in regard to Israel. Jude, the way the Israelis have treated the Palestinians is disgusting. It's grotesque. Dude, this sort of absolute rubbish that everything started on October 7th is
mm.
absolute, what would you say,
Simply not true. A
distortion of the
lie.
highest
A
degree of
lie.
history.
A lie.
There were
Yeah.
there were six there were six. That's a total lie. And Dude, as well as that, I'm not. I'm going to finish up because it's gone too long. Dude, the Israelis have killed 45,000 people. Trump has said that they can get now again. Biden barred the sale of £2,000 bombs. Trump says they can have them again. It's Gaza is basically wrecked. Trump is now saying that they should go to Jordan and as it Egypt and so on.
Clean
And
the place
it's
out. Clean the
disgusting
place out,
and
he
it's
says.
ethnic cleansing. It's a disgusting and Israelis. And Jude, if you this is my last point. There's about 4 or 5 ministers in the Israeli cabinet. Read their comments. They're saying basically nothing should move in Gaza. That every one of them should be killed. By the way, Jude, look it up. It's all available. These people are on the record saying this. No water, no electricity, no fuel, no nothing. They're basically saying, and they've been bombing them every day, every night for about 15 months.
Mhm. They're doing that, Pat, because they can. They're allowed to do it. Uh,
Yeah,
again, this
Mike
is a
is right.
question: how do you stop them? But they've been declared war criminals. What's the point in the United Nations calling people war criminals if there are no consequences? It's like saying, "Oh, Johnny down the road there, he's a criminal," and I saw him stealing something or I
Yeah.
saw him doing something unlawful, but I'm not going to do anything about it. What's the point in that? Um, I think you know that I have my reservations about Michael D. Higgins, but I applaud him to the echo there. Good for him. He's right to say, of
Yeah.
course, Auschwitz
Yeah.
was a terrible town and other places were terrible. I mean, they're a shame and a blot on
Mm.
humanity's reputation. That doesn't give you the
Yeah.
right then to go and start butchering other people and to find the likes of Trump saying, oh, yeah, we'll clear them out of there. Honest to God, he talks about people as if they were, I don't know, rubbish or
But
something.
Judy,
No.
here's the point: these Jewish people yesterday who have suffered so much, and their families, and so think we have no right to mention the suffering of anyone else. They said Michael D. Higgins had politicized it by mentioning Gaza.
Hmm.
Fucking arrogant is that?
Yeah, I was, yeah.
Because we suffered, we are not allowed to
Yes,
mention someone
that's
else's suffering.
exactly it. That's exactly it. I can understand their torment and the wounds that were inflicted on them, but
I
that doesn't say
understand
it
that. I
doesn't
am
give you the
totally
right
in
to put
favor
it
of that.
for anybody else. Exactly, exactly.
In other
They
words,
do.
well, by the way, you're not. What they're saying basically, you're not allowed to mention what we're doing wrong. You can only talk about what's been done to us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, as I say, Mike D. Higgins, I salute him. He's keeping the torch glowing good and bright. And I hope if there ever comes a question of neutrality, that he equally holds it high and bright. Listen, just one last
Wait,
question, Pat.
how long have we left, by the way?
We've about 2 minutes. 2 minutes. I was going to ask you, Pat. What was I going to ask you?
No, here's a quick question for
All
you.
right. Okay.
Jude? What about Trump and what about Trump sending people to Colombia on an airplane and threatening 25% tariffs if they don't
Hmm,
accept the
hmm.
Americans
And
or
it
the
worked.
Colombians send back?
And it worked.
He's already starting to threaten the Mexicans as well.
I have a Pat. Here's the thing you have to keep in mind, at least as I heard it, those people that were sent back to Colombia were had broken the law. Not in terms of broken the law and getting into the country, into the US, but I gather that they'd broken the law in other ways.
Yeah.
They must have done some crime or another. Now, if that's
Mm.
the case, I could see.
Yeah.
I actually would say, yeah, there's a case to be made for that. Uh, but if they all that they did was come into the country, I think that's sort of. I think it's shameful. Do you think? Or should you say, well,
Yeah,
look,
but no, and it's just no, they're just the way it was done. I think the sort of inhumane way it was done. They were dumping him, but he's now threatening him. So he's going to just threaten every country that doesn't abide by what has, 25% tariffs.
yeah. Well, if you've got people who are in the country illegally, would you not be in favour of doing something about them, Pat? Would that not be the case here in Ireland, in the south?
Yeah. Dude,
Huh?
no, that's just the bully boy tactics of the Americans. Dude, they can send them back, but not, in other words, I think Trump is just sort of now going, the typical bully boy. And by the way, I don't disagree with the premise. If these guys are criminals, send them back, surely. But
Yeah,
it's the way he's doing it, and
yeah,
it's threat and bully and intimidation. That's what
yeah.
I don't agree with.
Well, if you're looking for a hit figure on a wet Monday morning, Mr. Trump's the one, and I'm sure there'll be lots more.
Donald Trump, sure, man.
Yeah, of course, it'll be closely followed by
Uh,
Musk, who made an address to the far right party in Germany, telling them how much he admired them. Did you see that?
uh,
Huh.
no, I haven't, but that's the alternative for Germany. I mean, he did a 45-minute interview with somebody, and apparently all he did was laugh.
It's a funny
Yeah.
old world, Pat. I think we'll just have to rely on the odd bottle of wine, the odd good walk,
Yeah,
our
yeah,
family relationships,
yeah.
and other things like that. Okay,
Uh,
Pat. Thank you very much.
exactly.
Talk to you
On
again.
that note, Jim,
Enjoy your week.
talk to you soon.
Enjoy your week.
Thank you. See you Friday.
Okay. Yeah.